What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I've got another episode of the If I Could Only Have One series, and in this series we take a look at two firearms, whether very similar or in some cases very different, and we take a look at some of the stats of the firearms, some of the outstanding features of the firearms. Of course, we'll be wheeling and shooting along the way. We'll take a look at the triggers, and at the end I will announce a winner. But here's the thing, both of these guns are fantastic. If you are interested in either one or you own either or both of them, you're doing great. This is just an opportunity to take a step back and challenge myself and perhaps challenge you guys as well to say, if I could only have one or if you could only have one, which one would it be? So again, there will be a winner at the end of the video. So in today's video, we're taking a look at a couple of very popular double-action, single-action firearms. We've got the CZ P-07 right here, of course, unloaded with an unloaded magazine in it. I just prefer it that way. And then we've got the Sig Sauer P229 Enhanced Elite Blue Titanium model right here. And of course, I'll get into a little bit of that, what all of that means here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and knock some stats out of the way here real quick. I need to line these up in the camera for you. So from an overall length standpoint, the P-07 is 7.2 inches versus 7.7 inches on the P229. From a height standpoint, and keep in mind I do have an extended magazine in the P-07, so with a normal flat magazine, it would stand at 5.3 inches versus 5.4 inches on the P229. The barrel length on the P-07 is 3.75 inches versus 3.9 inches on the P229. And from a width standpoint, the P-07 is 1.46 inches versus 1.5 inches. Now from a weight standpoint, both unloaded of course, the P-07 is 27.7 ounces and the P229 is 29.8 ounces. Now here's the thing about the P229. This particular model is an alloy frame, so some models of the 229 are going to be heavier than this if they are all steel. So just keep that in mind as you're shopping around, depending on what model you're interested in. From a magazine capacity standpoint, both of these do have 15 round magazines. Now again, the P-07 right now has an extended round magazine in it. However, you can get flat magazines, and I'll throw that in there now. And this happens to be a magazine for a P10, but it works just fine in the P-07. So depending on what P-07 you have and how new it happens to be, those magazines may be interchangeable between those two firearms. So kind of a nice feature there if you have a P10. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of both of these here for just a few moments. So from a grip standpoint on the P-07, some really nice things going on here. Now it's all polymer, of course, and from a grip texture standpoint, now this is an interchangeable back strap, so you've got some options to customize this. They've got some relatively simple lines going on, just vertical lines, and once again on the front strap as well. And then some relatively, I'd say, mild or medium grip texture here on both these side straps. However, the gun sits really nicely in the hand. I think although it's a relatively, I don't know, kind of boring grip, frankly, because there's not a lot of finger grooves or a lot of curves or anything like that, I think it sits really nicely. And it's got enough of a beaver tail here to allow you to really kind of hike your hand up pretty far. So it sits nicely in the hand, it feels good, and it's just contoured enough to make it very comfortable. And again, with the swappable back straps, you can customize it just a little bit. Now from a magazine release standpoint, although it is not ambidextrous out of the box, you can actually swap that, so it's nice to have that feature. And then although this is a decocker right here, this particular model, and there are several that do, some come with a safety that you can swap out as well. So if you want the safety version, you can do that. This did come with that, and I swapped it out for the decocker. I just prefer that, but you do have some options there as well. Now from a slide release or slide lock standpoint, which is right here, and this doubles as another feature as well, one thing I do not like about it as a slide release, it's pretty far up there. Now I can reach it with my thumb, but only just. My fingers are long, but my thumbs aren't necessarily quite so long. So I don't really like the placement, so I have to really use a one-handed rack on this, generally speaking. So I would have liked to have seen these controls maybe moved back just a tiny bit. That's just me. It's pretty nitpicky, but an observation for sure. But like I said, this actually also doubles as your takedown lever, and it functions a little bit more like a 1911. And I would say you could use maybe the butt of a magazine, something, and I'm not going to take it down in this video. It takes a little bit too much time, but there are a couple of lines back here on the frame and the slide which you would line up. And as you've lined those up, you would push your button and then pull your takedown lever completely out, and then your slide pops right off, and you can go to work cleaning it, field stripping it, whatever you need to do. Now, another feature about the frame that I really like, they carry forward the grip texture up high on the frame here on both sides for reference, whether it be your index finger, kind of like this, or your thumb for your grip, which I use quite a bit. I really like that. So it just allows for an extra feature. It's very comfortable. It's a nice reference point. I like that quite a bit. And then it does have your accessory rail for your lights, lasers, grenade launchers, as you would expect. Now, from a slide standpoint, I think it's a very attractive slide. You'll see they've done some milling down both sides here and given it a little bit of a slant, so it doesn't have a squared off look like perhaps a Glock or something like that. And it does feature rear and front serrations on it as well. So I think they've made it very attractive. I think it looks really good. It sits very low in the frame, which I will explain here in just a moment. But from a sight perspective, now these are metal sights out of the box, and these happen to be the phosphorescent sights. So they do actually capture a little bit of ambient light, whether inside or outside, and they will glow for a period of time. That's all fine and good if you're plinking outside or you're at the range or something like that. But from a concealed carry standpoint, I don't think they do a lot of good, especially if it's inside the waistband, because this will be covered up most of the time, so those will not be charging. One other outstanding feature about this that is really outstanding with a lot of different CZ models and a few other manufacturers as well, you'll notice this shiny rail right here. The rails for the P-07 actually sit inside the frame, and that's a little different than a lot of other firearms, those sitting outside the frame. And what that really allows us to do is get that slide a lot lower into the frame. It sits very low, and once again, that translates into the gun just sitting as low in your hands while you're shooting as possible, reducing a little bit of felt recoil and muzzle flip as well. So a nice unique feature, and I think it also adds to the attractiveness of the firearm. So let's go ahead and take a look at the P229 for a moment or two here. Now again, I said this is the enhanced elite version. There are quite a few different versions of the 229, and depending on which one you go with, it might come with different grips. Now this happens to feature the E2 grips, which I actually like quite a bit. And these E2 grips wrap around 3/4 of the frame right here, front, back, and sides, or back and sides rather. And on the front, it's actually just checkering built into the alloy frame right here. And that means that the purchase on this firearm is very good. I mean, this gun really stays very well planted. The grip isn't too aggressive, but it's certainly comfortable enough. Now, one thing that I'm not as fond of with this, and I'm going to line this back up, and if you'll notice, and it may be hard to see, but that left side of the grip comes out just a little bit more than the right side does. And that's because of some of the functions, some of the buttons going on right here, which I'll explain in a moment. But what that also means is it's a wider grip, and for me at least, I've noticed the last couple of times I've taken this to the range, especially when taking other guns, that although it's very comfortable, I have to think a little bit more about this grip, and it perhaps isn't as comfortable as maybe some other guns. That's totally opinion, it's just me, but something I've noticed for sure. Now, the magazine release, once again, is only on the left side for your right-handed shooters. However, you can swap this out as well. Now, I would say use caution on this one from what I understand. There are a lot of different parts going on in here, and of course you have to take off the grips and take the magazine out, that sort of thing, and there's perhaps a little bit more of an opportunity to make some mistakes. Again, I haven't done it, so I can't speak personally, but just from what I've read and what I've seen on other videos and that sort of thing. So perhaps use caution, maybe get an expert to do it, but if you're comfortable doing those things, more power to you. Now, from a slide release standpoint, one thing I really like about the P229, the slide release is right here. So it's much further back than the P-07 at least, which means that it's a little bit more natural to actuate that if you want to release that slide and use it as a slide release. And then the decocker is opposite of the P-07, so it's in front, and this is sort of a very classic 226, 229, so that P series of firearms where you've got this swinging lever right here, and it will decock the firearm. So just a different manual of arms or type of operation to get used to and train with a little bit, but once you get used to it, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, from a takedown standpoint, you would take your magazine out, of course, but then it has a pretty standard takedown lever, and you would just slide the slide right off. And no need to pull the trigger. Actually, no need to pull the trigger on either of these firearms. So a little bit easier in the field, I'd say, to take this apart than the P-07, but only by a small margin. Now, once again, it does have your accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, that sort of thing, so they share that same feature. And then from a slide standpoint, very classic Sig Sauer. It looks a lot like a lot of their P series and their 1911 line. Very classic looking, I think. And it does have your rear and front serrations, although the front serrations are halved, but definitely still do the job. Very usable, of course. And then from a sight standpoint, I'll stand this up for you. It does have these Sig Light night sights on it. Certainly bright enough. I think they do a good job. I see no reason to get aftermarket sights for this particular firearm right here, and it does have a ledge for one-handed manipulations, which the P-07 does not stock. Now, if you wanted a fiber optic or something, then you would go for your aftermarket. But again, these sights I think do very well, especially from a defensive standpoint. So that's really it from a stats and features standpoint right here. We're going to be taking a look at a little bit of shooting, and when we come back, we'll look at the triggers and announce a winner. So stay tuned. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, both of these firearms are a lot of fun to shoot, and they are certainly very accurate firearms. Now, when I took both of these and shot them both together, and I started with the P-07, I had a little bit of an epiphany, at least for me personally. You guys probably already know this, but they have very different shooting characteristics. They feel very different, and I had to apply different techniques or fundamentals, so to speak, or at least for me, as much as I can differentiate between the two because of the way they shot. So I want to explain that a little bit as we look at these triggers. Now we're going to look at the P-07 first, and I've loaded both of these magazines with a couple of dummy rounds. I don't like to dry fire hammer-fired firearms very much. It's just me. It's kind of how I was raised. So it's just kind of my thing. But from a trigger perspective, now I've got this in single action mode right here. I'm going to go ahead and decock it, and I'll do double action right here. From a double action standpoint, this measures right around 7 pounds or so. And I will say that from a double action standpoint, I'll go ahead and pull this. It's a very smooth trigger. It feels really good. It's not terrifically heavy, which is nice, certainly heavier than most striker fires, that sort of thing. But it's really not entirely too bad. And I'll go ahead and do this again. Very smooth, and it feels pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and eject that first round out of there, and we'll do our reset. Now there's our reset. Now that's a fair distance out, probably about 3.5 millimeters or so, and then it goes back out to the start. The reset is not bad at all, but just a little bit further out than a lot of the common striker-fired firearms out there, so something to get used to. But then from a single action standpoint, again, that trigger is going to travel much further. You don't have to work through that double action pull, and then you get to a wall. And there you go. There you've got your break right there, and that's going to come in around 3.5 pounds. And we'll go ahead and do that reset one more time. And there's your reset. Nice audible tactile reset. So from a double action, single action trigger standpoint, I think the P-07 does a really good job. And again, it sits low in the hand, and it shoots pretty flat. So a lot of fun. It was fun to dial this in and put some fun rounds down range on target. So let's go ahead and take a look at the P229. And once again, I've got dummy rounds for this as well. And like I was saying before, the shooting characteristics of the P229, again, very good, but I noticed it was a little bit different, and part of that has to do with the slide height or the bore axis, and I'll kind of explain as we go here, but we'll go ahead and do some trigger pulls here real quick. Now, the double action trigger pull on the P229 is about 10 pounds, so it is definitely heavier than the P-07. However, once again, it's extremely smooth. I think it feels good. Although it is heavier, it is certainly a very nice trigger for sure. It pops that bullet right out. And then we have our reset. Now, the Enhanced Elite has the short reset trigger, and of course I will do that again, but it's an absolutely fantastic trigger. Now we're going to go ahead and do our single action pull, and this comes in right around 4.5 or so pounds, a little bit less than that. But we've got just a little bit of uptake there. Again, extremely smooth, and you're almost right at the very end of the trigger housing, I like to call this. And once you do, there's your pull right there. And we'll do that reset again. And this having that short reset, check out this reset. Right there. It's almost like a Legion, not quite. The Legion's a little bit better, but it is darn close. So a very short reset, which is great. But like I was saying, the one thing that was very different about this, and shooting this after the P-07, I noticed that there was a lot more muzzle flip or muzzle rise as I was shooting. And part of that is because, again, that slide is just sits higher than the P-07. If I was shooting only this in a day, it would be, I think, a little bit easier to dial in. I got a little spoiled with the P-07, but this is definitely a very accurate gun and a very shootable and a very pleasurable gun to shoot. But it shot a little bit different that particular day for me. So, take that for what it's worth, depending on what you're after. If slide height is something that's very important to you, this one is definitely going to sit just a little bit higher. So now we come to the end of the video, and I said before, it's an if I could only have one, so I need to choose a winner, and it is always extremely challenging to do this because I like both guns. I think they're fantastic. They're both my guns. But for whatever reason, I think it's fun to say, okay, if I could only keep one, which one would it be? Now, I've got a long-standing relationship with Sig Sauer firearms. I've owned a lot over the years and have had a lot of fun. They brought a lot of joy to me. I've carried several over the years, and they've just been a lot of fun. And I think the P229 and the 226 are really classic Sig firearms. I mean, when you think about Sig Sauer, most people think about things like the P226 and even the 229, especially with their law enforcement and military history. They've got a long history there, and it's just a fantastic firearm. It's a lot of fun to shoot, and I think this is a very unusual, cool-looking firearm with this titanium blue right here. So it's been a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. But when I sit and think about if I could only have one, for whatever reason, as I not only hold the P-07, but as I shoot the P-07, for whatever reason, it just shoots a little bit better for me. I think part of it is probably because it feels a little bit more like a polymer firearm. I know it's not a striker-fired firearm like a Glock or P-10C or something like that, but it's a little bit more reminiscent of that. So it just, in my hand, it feels a little bit more like home, perhaps, than maybe the 229, and it's a little bit lighter, and having that slide in the frame is just, it's unusually cool, and I think it's a fantastic function of the firearm right here. So at the end of the day, although it's tough, I would say if I could only have one, I would choose the CZ P-07. Now, I'm always looking forward to your comments to see if you guys agree or disagree with me. What other firearms you think should be thrown in the mix for a video like this? Always looking forward to that. Once again, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.